Hi there crafters, it's Louise with you, and today I am sharing a 12 by 12 scrapbook layout created for Mystical Scrapbooks, and I am using the uniquely creative True North collection. And I wanted to include a little bit of texture in this layout. So firstly I'm going to go ahead and cut this paper background so that I've got all the pieces individually that I can start to use in building some layers. I sort of had in mind that I was going to start this particular layout with a little bit of a monochrome theme, so a little bit of black and white with some color in the background, but you can sort of see that as it develops it kind of extends beyond that a little bit and starts to get into something a little bit more colorful in the background. Now what I'm doing is just applying some texture paste through a stencil. Now my texture paste actually got dropped and has a crack in the bottom. That's why it's in the extra little plastic container. So there's no trick to storing your texture paste. That's just for this particular new container so it doesn't dry out because of that crack. I've put it in the extra container. Now I want to give you a little tip about using texture paste here if you've never played around with it before, and that is when you're applying it through a stencil to make sure that you don't go to the edges of the stencil, because you get those sort of square edges and you will run into trouble in terms of how the texture paste looks in the background. Now I personally like to let my paste dry naturally, but you can use a heat gun if you prefer. So what I do is pop the layout off to the side and let it dry overnight. Now I've got my little container of water and brushes ready, and I'm going to use the Color Blast Shimmer Dust, which are one of my favorite items to create interest in the background. And you can see that my palette is well loved, and if you can dedicate a palette to the Color Blast Shimmer Dust, you can actually let them dry out and then reactivate them with water. So the color that I've used is Lush first of all, and you can see that my Lush had dried out. So I actually put some more Lush shimmer dust into the palette and then activated it with water, and then I'll just pop it to the side and then reactivate it next time I want to use it. So depending on the depth of color that you want will depend on how much shimmer dust you add and how much water you add. So you can see that the technique here is not particularly hard. I'm basically just using my brush, water from the dipper, and then my spray bottle to spread that color around. I'm also adding some splatters of color with my thick brush, and that's just to help move the color into that different degrees of what am I trying to say here? It gives the color different depth, so you can see that there's some areas of dark green, some areas of dark yellow, and that's to do with how much color I'm using. Now, because my yellow kind of got a little bit out of control, I did end up doing the yellow border around the outside, but I actually think it finishes it off quite nicely. Now the page is particularly warped, so I'm going to use this older patterned paper that I don't particularly like, that I'm going to mount my white cardstock on, just to give it a little bit of something to stick to so that it's not so warped, and I can continue to build the layout. Now the little cool dude was something that I fussy cut out of one of those True North papers, and I'm also using some of the ribbon that I got from the store this month. And it's at this point where I'm sort of looking at behind the photo and thinking, all right, it's really colourful in the background, but I do need to break it down somehow. And I'm going to use my Distress Crayon, which if you work fast enough you can actually blend quite nicely with your finger. You don't actually need any water to activate it. You can use water with the Distress crayons, but it's not necessarily. You can just smudge them around. If you leave them for too long, they will lose that smudgeability, but certainly they are quite easy to move around, as you saw. Now on the left hand side, what you can see here is one of my little stash boxes, and I like to store my elements by colour. So this is my black and white box, white at the top and black at the bottom, and that way when I'm working on a particular layout, if I need to come across something in a certain colour, like I could have looked at green or yellow for this, but I wanted to include some more black elements in that that monochrome kind of feel. So I pulled out the black and white box, and you can see that I've pulled out a couple of little stickers, some stars, a few little fun things, a little bit more distress crayon, and I'm going to add some black splatters in there just to help with this very mixed media type background. Once that's dried, I've glued a lot of stuff on off camera, and you can see for things like that texture element, the burlap ribbon, I glue those down with my hot glue gun because I just find that it gives a better adhesive, and it's going to last longer on the page, that adhesive. So depending on what I'm gluing will depend on the type of glue. Now, because I've also put a lot of stuff on the background of this paper, I also double glue most of that. So I use adhesive double-sided tape, but I also use just your plain old tacky glue as well. Now I've added some stickers, I've got a little bit of journaling there, a couple more cutouts just to balance this layout and make it quite descriptive. But basically after that, this is pretty close to finished. I'm going to add a little bit of stamping, but pretty much a completed layout. So started one way with that monochrome theme in mind, but ended up completely different, and I do love how this has turned out. So if you made it to the end, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit the little subscribe button, and of course check out Mystical Scrapbooks for everything used in this video.